What is up, everybody? I'm Brett Pape. That's Coach Bruce on the top. And we got our boss, Kyron Williams, from The Cut and from the Debbie Royale. And this is the Coach Approach.
Stay on.
What is up? I'm so excited, and not just because I get to talk football with Coach Bruce, and not just because we have the Debbie Royale's own Kyron Williams, but because we're talking rookie running backs. And if you're like me and you're like Coach Bruce, because you're not, Kyron, but you're old. We're old. So if you're like us, man, running backs
this is true.
Football are everything. In the past, in one quarterback leagues, man, running backs have always been the priority. So I can't wait to get into it. But before we do, Coach Bruce, how you doing, brother? Glad to see you home. You're finally not on the road, and you enjoy your family a little bit this week. So tell me how you're doing.
I'm doing fantastic, man. There's always pluses and minuses, right? Like when you're on the road, you know you have a quiet hotel room, right? You can just, there's nothing else going on around you. But I'd much rather be home. Now I'm home. Daughter just got back from working out. Wife's about to come home. We've got a new puppy addition to the family. So I'm sure when she walks in, she's like a dog whisperer, man. These dogs go nuts every time she comes home. So I'll try to mute out when those situations happen, man. But it's good to be home for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Kyron, man, I'll tell you what. I have been it's been more than just excited for you because I'm a fan of yours. But as a content reader, seeing what you and Du Bois 22 and To Whom the Bell Tolls, Jeff, and all you guys are doing over the Debbie Royale, man, I got to tell you, man, I'm really happy with the success that you guys are having right now.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild year. We actually celebrated our year anniversary this week, and Kevin posted a nice video. Thank you, Kevin, for that. He thanked Jeff and I, but we just can't thank everyone enough for the support that we've gotten in that first year at the Debbie Royale. And, you know, we're still doing some really good things at the Cut too. You know, our podcast is rocking a little bit. Randy and I just finished up our position rankings this week. So it's draft time, and that's the most exciting time for both of these networks that I'm affiliated with because we love talking prospects. So, but yeah, so, Brett, did you want me to touch on some of the stuff for the Debbie Royale?
Here's the thing. As I've said it from day one, and Coach Bruce and I think we're a lot the same, but we're still different in the sense that I don't have the time to put in to be a true analyst, and B, I have other desires. I gotta correct this golf swing a little bit more. So with me saying that, I am a strong believer that you got to go out and find people that you can trust, that you don't have to be an analyst, but if you can find something like the Debbie Royale that allows you to say, okay, I'm going to go all in on their content and use them to draft, trade, or whatever it may be, then I'm all in. And what you guys are doing right now, I think it's incredible because just today I'm sitting in here in trade negotiations and someone's, offering a 23rd, third rounder for something. And then I go over to your Debbie rookie rankings on the Debbie Royale Patreon, and I can see that, man, I'll tell you what, that third round may not be that. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and throw that in any other picks? So, yeah, I'd love for you to share kind of what the consumer is going to get when they sign up for that $3 or the $10 subscription with Patreon.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a Patreon. This is fairly new. We've done this. I think this is our third month with this launch, but essentially, the $1 tier, you're looking at, you'll join us in the Discord. It's a really good time over there as well. We get a lot of trade questions. So if you're not like fully into it just yet, you're not so sure that Debbie is your thing, but you want to kind of get a taste, we have that tier for those that are kind of just introducing themselves. But I will say, the Debbie Manifesto, it was kind of our baby. We worked on that for many, many months. And then we released it in the the $3 tier, the day tier here. So essentially, the Debbie Manifesto it lists out every Power 5 program and a couple additional, I think we've got just Notre Dame as the independent one in there. But it has depth charts. It has 2022 outlook. It has kind of some recaps. But the best part about the Debbie Royale's Patreon is honestly, Kevin is the driving force behind all of it. And shout out Jeff as well, because I think together we work really well to kind of see the vision, but we are consistently updating this thing, whether it's the Debbie Manifesto, whether it's the Rookie Manifesto that actually came out this last month, where we kind of gave our rookie rankings as we head into the 2022 NFL draft, give some outlook on that, or whether it's the next update that we have coming, which will be a post-draft rookie update as well. We have got some big plans for summer content. We have some news. I can't really share it just yet, but good things happening. And then also, if you're sold on that and you say, well, I want a little bit more, this $10 a month tier, we found we were kind of struggling to figure out what would be really helpful. And we kind of talked through, my first year of playing Debbie and Campus to Canton leagues, I would have loved for some individual help, personalized help. And so we had added in the personalized roster analysis, where you'll send us your roster and say, this is kind of the direction I want to go with it, but I'm really not sure how to get there. We'll go ahead and make like a 10 to 20 minute video where we kind of give our opinions on your roster, where you could go, whether you should focus on, building out your Debbie or your Campus to Canton, or just go win now mode on the NFL side. It's a lot of good things. Kevin and Jeff are two of the most brilliant people that I have met in this space, and I am very, very honored every day to be working with them. So yeah, that's kind of the gist. The Patreon can be found if you go to patreon.com/the Debbie Royale. You can follow us at the Debbie Royale as well. So you can kind of get a taste. We drop shows. We're live every Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then we have a YouTube as well. So check that out. We just added some rookie wide receivers on there throughout this week. I don't even think all of them are out just yet. So
well, you guys
that's
just
kind of the
released,
gist.
you guys just
What's
released the Burks video. Saw that one just recently. And one thing you didn't mention was just having your rankings, just being able to look at all three of you guys and how you rank the classes in the future. And for me to have a one-stop shop to be able to see that, hey man, this 2023 class, I got Bryce Young, I got CJ Stroud, it allows me to kind of really take a look at trying to acquire picks in the future as add-ons, just so I'm kind of fully aware of what's coming. And so for me, that's the way I use it. And if you're not someone who's willing to put in the time and effort like you guys do, it's such a great resource. So I know that I spent a lot of money last month, and the best money I spent was probably those $3. So well, I know you did. It's pretty sweet, man. I can't tell you how much I'm, just thankful to be a part of your organization, even knowing that you guys are putting it out, even though I did nothing for it.
Yeah. I think the key too that's so great about it is doesn't matter what level you're at with C2C, Debbie Royale, fantasy football, whatever it is, or Debbie leagues, it's really neat to be able to go. There's so many paid sites. And so as someone, you're like, hey, how do I know which sites to go to and which ones have good return on investment that I can actually take that, have actionable content, and say, I can apply that to my teams today. And sometimes I know for me, it's like trial and error, right? Like when you first start out, you buy into all these different sites, and then you find out really quick which ones have the staying power, hook you in, and get you to continue to, make payments, so to speak, on that. And what you guys have done, and I'm not I don't do the Debbie leagues yet, but I keep saying I'm going to get into it. I need to. For a guy that's not doing it, just looking at the work you guys have done and how good it's just as good as or better than the magazine you can go to a store and buy. And I truly mean that, because I can actually have it on my computer, and we're in a day and time where it's all about technology, right? Less people are carrying around magazines. They're looking at videos, short videos. What can I get the most information from in the quickest amount of time in between a meeting, on a flight, in a hotel room, wherever that is? And so everything you guys are doing is fantastic, man. And it speeds up your process. If you're watching college games and you've already looked at some of the information you guys have or in the upcoming season, man, it's all there. So I think just a shout out to you guys and the work you've done. And not only are you guys just, huge friends of ours and supporters, and we support you guys a ton, but all three of you guys and the time and effort you guys put in is awesome, man. So huge shout out to you guys.
Thank you. Yeah. And the other thing that I really didn't get to touch on, because I kind of forget all the things that we tossed in there. We did some mock drafts to kind of build out some ADP for C2C and Debbie. We also did NFL mock drafts. We've really honed in on this rookie class over the last month or so. And so the updates that are coming, I don't like to spoil it in advance, because, it's the exciting part when we drop it. But we've got a lot of really, really good stuff. And I think that most people have found that it's worth $3 a month. And, some people have actually upgraded from the 3 to the 10.
Yeah.
If you want a little taste of it, we do drop little previews as well. So we do have a couple of the pages somewhere scattered. Kevin's tweeted them out. The show account has tweeted them out. So if you want to go check that out as like a little preview, those are available. But thank you guys a ton for the kind words. And again, most of that credit, I'm going to give all the credit to Kevin and Jeff, because Jeff was the mastermind behind this, and Kevin is, the hardworking phrase kind of gets thrown around a lot in this space. When I tell you that Kevin is the hardest working guy I've really ever met in this space, I mean that. He's just fantastic. So shout out to those guys. Love you guys if you're watching, and if you're not, watch it back.
Yeah, well, I think we should.
There you go, man.
You guys are awesome. Kevin's my favorite, and Jeff's funny and shit. I mean, even Christmas, the things that he times. I'm wondering. I mean, it seems like sometimes it might be 420 every day for him. But let's move on. And what I wanted to get into this is your second aspect that you've been doing a hell of a lot of, and that's your mock drafts. And what I wanted to touch upon that is, as someone who I did it once, I had a child who was sick when she was born, and she had apnea, where she didn't breathe as she struggled with it at times. And so I quit teaching for 2 years to stay home with her today. And I worked for the local paper, and I begged and pleaded, because I've always been a huge draft guy. I mean, there's nothing better than watching the draft. I loved it when it was Saturday morning all day and then Sunday all morning, but now it's changed a little bit. It's still great no matter what it was. But I convinced them to let me do a rookie mock draft. It was printed on the day and so forth. So with that being said, you've been doing, it seems like every other week, and you're complaining about the trades that are making because it affects you and that. But with that being said, I kind of want to talk about the process. And if I were to do this, I would think the first way I would go is to kind of attack a big board and just first rank out all the players. And then I'm going to go into teams' needs, and then I'm just going to kind of cut and paste from there. Kind of tell me how you go about in producing a real mock draft.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because So I've graded, I believe 187 is my number now, and I still need to get to 200. But we have a pretty intensive scouting process at the cut that kind of allows us to decipher some of these guys. Back in the day, I used to just kind of say, well, I like that player, and I think I like him better than that player, but I'm not really sure, because they kind of do a lot of the same things. So Randy and I at the cut put together this kind of comprehensive grading scale. It's 10 different metrics for each position, with the one constant or two constants being production and athleticism, because you have to be an athlete to play in the NFL, right? So that's kind of the first step, is get enough of those guys watched that I feel comfortable saying that they could go in the first round. Because when I start the mocks, I typically just do first round mocks. My final mock this year was a third rounder because I found that to be really fun last year. But I typically start with first round mocks. So I grade out enough guys that I feel comfortable saying, well, this guy could go here, because I like to be predictive with all of my mocks. There are a lot of people that take mocks and just have fun with them, but I like to just try to be as predictive as possible. But the interesting part is when I'm building out my big board, I am also looking at guys that I think the NFL will like more than me. So, for example, a guy like Sauce Gardner, I have him as a back end first round player. I think he struggles in zone. Sauce Gardner is a corner from Cincinnati. If
Right.
there's someone listening that doesn't know, but I think he struggles in zone coverage at times. I think he can be a little too grabby, but I also know that length and just overall ability to kind of sit on an island is valuable to most NFL teams. And so I kind of go against my big board in situations like that. And I kind of start to value players in the way that the NFL will. Sometimes that bites me because sometimes my evaluation is how the NFL is seeing it. And we get a lot of smoke from a lot of, plugged in guys. And sometimes I buy too much into that when I'm creating these mock drafts. But overall, it's just a really fun process. I stress about it, I especially because I try to incorporate trades too, and I know I'm not going to be 100% right, but I still try to be as predictive as possible. And I'm still waiting for the day that I accurately predict a trade up with just the two teams. I don't even need the picks to be right, because I'm always a little wrong with those ones. But it's a good time. Mock drafting is one of my favorite parts of draft season. So.
Well, I think what's really neat too about it is it's that time of year, right, where it's so much fun to put mock drafts together. I know PFF and some other sites have got some apps you can get on there, and in 5 minutes you can do your entire 7-round mock, or you can do the entire, all 32 teams for 7 rounds. But it's so hard to predict. I mean, you listen to Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky and all these guys on NFL Network, and everybody's got a little different spin. But I think what's really neat about what you guys do too, and I got to imagine this is a huge advantage. So if I'm listening or looking at mock drafts, I really want to look at guys that have been tracking these college players for longer than just this offseason. And that's the great thing I think about what you guys are doing with the Debbie Royale is you guys are watching these kids coming out of high school as they sign the letters of intent, how they're ranked in the ESPN 300, and then all the way through their college career. And so I think it's really neat for you guys probably to say, hey, we've been watching this kid since he was 17, 18, signed his letter of intent. And now we've watched him through 4 years of college, 5 years maybe, if they take another year or whatever, but are the late declare injuries. And then you get to kind of say, hey, I know these players really well. I know what these NFL teams are looking for. I know schematically what they like to do on whether, it's on the offensive side or defensive side of the ball. So I can only imagine for you guys, it's got to be a lot of fun to put these things together because you guys have a much deeper knowledge of a lot of these players than I think the average person does. It just plays around with a mock draft, likes to post it on Twitter, and say, hey, what do you think? You know what I mean? That's me. I'm that guy, by the way. I'm that guy.
Right. Yeah, no, and I also think it presents an advantage, right? So
Yeah.
Jeff was one of the first ones, and I had my concerns, but Kyron Williams was popping up as a top 2 running back for a lot of people about 4 months ago. And Jeff and I had kind of discussed, and I said, I have concerns. Is he able to get the edge? Is he actually an athlete? And so in my scale, I had been a little cautious with it. And just this is a running back episode, so I wanted to bring up Kyron, but if you have him in your top 5, I get it because the film is really, really good for the most part. It's just, is he an athlete? How does the NFL then value that? Because we kind of saw that with Michael Carter. He was a little smaller last year, ended up a 4th round pick. And, Kyron's kind of that same mold, right? So Jeff and I were talking and Jeff was like, I don't really know. I mean, I'd be a little cautious with how we're viewing Kyron because in startups, Kyron was going in like the 6th round at times, and it was really, really rich. And so then the testing numbers come through, and then you kind of see him slipping down everyone's boards, and that just that's the advantage of kind of getting to these guys a little earlier.
Well, I think that's what Kyron killed him, right? It's like if you watched him play, there's a lot of things you watched and on tape that you really like, and then you look at where the metrics come in at, and you look at a slower 40 time I think people were expecting, right, coming in at 4.65. only a 32-inch vertical. His broad jump wasn't, great. And so you really start to look at that, and it's where analytics, I think, meets film. I think Kyron's a great example of that. Like a lot of the initial running backs I was breaking down, Kyron Williams wasn't even on my list, right? And that's how crazy and out of whack it got. And then, obviously you realize that, hey, if you watch the tape, there's a lot of things about Kyron Williams to like that can transfer to the NFL. So he's one player I'm curious to see, how that plays out.
Well, before we get into the rookies, let's talk about something that's been all over media lately, and that's the whole Deebo Samuel, whatever, trade or not trade. And you've getting reports where he's not happy having a role as a running back. Then you get people say that he's concerned about having Trey Lance as his quarterback, and you get reports that all he cares about is the money. Between you two, is he going to get traded, or do you think that this is just smoke and we'll finally see San Francisco kind of empty the bank there pretty soon for him?
Okay, you want me to go first? Okay,
sure.
I think this is that time of year, and I always joke around about coach speak, right? Like, don't believe anything you hear at this time of the season. Don't believe anything about what the teams are telling you about the draft, unless you have inside information, which a lot of us that are just on the Twitter space don't necessarily have. But Deebo, I look and I put myself in his shoes the other day when all those tweets were before the trade stuff came out. We're talking about where we rank Deebo in terms of, is he a wide receiver one? Where do you rank him in your rankings? And I was really taking a look at Deebo and saying he capitalized on an offensive system with Kyle Shanahan that catered to what he needed because of the injuries in that backfield. And you can go through the list of injuries from last season. There was a need for Deebo to do what they needed him to do. And so I think they realized they caught lightning in a bottle, because at first it was more of a gadget thing. And then that turned into he's getting meaningful carries, third down situations, goal line situations. They're using him in third and long, seeing if they can catch the defense in a too high look and bailing and say, hey, we can run him on something else and have an opportunity here. So I looked at Deebo as, first of all, I don't always believe the fluff, but I think there's a little bit to this one, because I think it's gone on long enough. There's been enough said at this point. You've got to believe there's some truth to it. When I heard the part about if Jimmy G goes, I go, I was like, that's where I start to not believe in it as much, right? It's actually said, right? Consider the sources. But I think Deebo is smart. He sees what the wide receiver market is doing. He realizes he brings something different. He was a wide receiver one when he was being used primarily as a wide receiver. Then you look to what he did as a running back and what his yards per touch were, and you're like, hey, we've got something here. So what's he doing? He's doing something right now. He's going to capitalize on that and say, hey, I'm going to take advantage of where the market's at. I'm going to play a little hardball, and I'm going to get my money. And so I think whether you like it or not, to me as a player trying to get my bag, I understand why he's doing what he's doing. But just where else is he going to go and have that opportunity that he has in San Francisco? I think he proved enough that, hey, coming into this year, they're going to use him in the same role. Now, is it going to be as often? I don't think it is. But where else can he go? Kyle Shanahan has one of the best run games in the NFL. Schematically, what he can do with players, I don't know where else Deebo can go and have that much of an impact. So is he just trying to capitalize on the market right now when his market's extremely high? Yeah, I think he is. What are your thoughts on it? I think you lost Brett a little bit.
Yeah, he's spinning a little bit there. So I mean, I think that there's substance to it. You talk about inside sources. I actually got a DM from someone a couple weeks ago now that said that there is substance to this Deebo talk before there was actually substance to the Deebo talk, and I didn't really believe it. I don't really take a lot of the DMs I get super seriously, but then this person gave me the three of the 5 favorites that are now favored to land him. And so now I think that this has been a long time coming. And so I do think that there is something to this. And to your point, I think that there are probably 2 teams that I would feel comfortable with actually utilizing him in the way that he needs to be used. Now, I also want to say, I don't think he should be paid as a top receiver in the league. Now, there was the report of one of the NFC coaches that coached against him saying, well, he's a top 3 player in the NFL. And, that might be true, but all of the kind of work that it takes to get him to be that, I don't know that that's worth 30 million or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever he's about to get paid. So I get the stance from the 49ers saying, listen, you've been hurt. You had to be used in a certain way in order to be effective. And quite frankly, he was a good receiver, but he wasn't this caliber of receiver when, he wasn't getting backfield touches as much. So, yeah, I think he wants to be traded. I think there are two teams, and the two teams to me are the New York Jets because of the old
Yeah.
49ers coaching staff, and the Green Bay Packers because I think that they do a really, really good job of getting the ball in their playmakers' hands. You look at how Devontae Adams was just peppered with targets. I would expect something similar for Deebo Samuel. Of course, they would have to be a little bit more gadgety than Devontae was used, but they love to toss Devontae in motion and then just hit him on a short little flat route and let him work. And that's kind of exactly how I think Deebo can be successful as well. So we'll see what kind of happens from here on out. But yeah, I do think that they won a lot for him and they lost the leverage today. And I think that he knew that he was taking the leverage back and saying, I'm done. I just need you guys to trade me because his agent's probably telling him this needs to happen before the NFL draft or it's really not going to happen for a few months. So it's a crazy situation.
It is crazy, and it's funny. You see all the artwork, I'll call it, being put on Twitter where people are putting Deebo in their favorite team's uniform, and you get out of Cowboy fans talking about, oh man, what a great fit would he be in Dallas. I think we've fallen so much in love with what he was last year, and I don't see him ever duplicating that again, not at that level, especially moving to a different team. And so I'm not as high on Deebo as a wide receiver or as a running back. Do I think that he brings a lot to the table? Yeah. Do I love what he can do in the yak game? Do I love what he can do in the screen game? Do I love the ability to put him into the backfield and use him in the slot as a movement guy? Absolutely. But it's interesting because I think like the Colts, I thought about Colts would be a great landing spot for him too, just because you have Pittman, who's your guy that is your, red zone target. They've been trying to use him more in the screen game. I don't feel like that fits his skill set because of a need. Hilton was out, Paris Campbell was out, and they were trying to figure out a way to make this work. And I was like, God, great O-line. You've got an aging quarterback now that Matt Ryan's taken over there. It's like it'd be a great situation. But you kind of fall in love with figuring out where would Deebo really fit. Now, Jets, 100% agree. I agree with both teams that you said. I think Jets has been one of the most popular teams out there. I hear a lot about the Kansas City Chiefs. I think people fall in love with, they lost Tyreek Hill, and they could see a fit there too. But it's a fun thing to play, but it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. I think you're right. I think his timing before the draft was pretty smart.
Hey guys, how are you?
Welcome to the show.
Hey,
I feel like I should introduce you as a guest.
I feel like, do you ever see one of my favorite movies is Almost Famous? And not that I'm the lead singer of this group, but I feel like the bus was just pulling away and I'm like, you're always forgetting me, but I digress and let's move on. Let's get into the backs. And I brought this up earlier, man. Running backs are everything for an old guy. I mean, I want as many of them as I possibly can get. And before we get into Coach Bruce's top 5, I just kind of want to know you, Christian, this class as overall. You've probably followed it over the last couple of years. There seems to be, I think, Breece Hall's numbers at the combine and Breece Hall's I saw a lot of Isaiah Spiller ahead of him as recently as October, November. And now it's almost like we've got this is a bigger discrepancy than CEH and Jonathan Taylor 2 years ago. This is Breece Hall's class without a doubt if you look at the consensus.
Yeah. And so when stacking it up to, previous or my particular favorite future classes, I think that overall we're going to get a couple of good backs from this class, but I think what we're looking at from a fantasy football perspective is mostly RB2s. I think that when you look forward to the 2023 class, there's potential to have 5 or 6 RB1s next year, and I can't wait until the dynasty community. Now, of course, everyone is kind of aware that the 2023 class is this insane thing, but I can't wait till the discussion and the discourse starts to play out. But this class, it's good. I think people were really, really down on it early. When comparing it to last year's class, though, I think the top 3 to 4 stack up pretty well with the top 3 to 4 last year. We'll talk about the rankings, and I don't want to give too much away here, but when I've put together a few lists, and that's kind of one of my new favorite things to do is kind of combine classes as I graded them, because I think it helps me look at, well, am I overvaluing this person? Am I kind of giving them grades that don't really match what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing? But when I put together the 2 lists, I think there were 4 of these guys, maybe just 3 in my top 10 over the last 3 classes. So not too bad.
Not too bad. Well, let's get right into it. And I kind of gave you, it's not a surprise, but kind of gave away Coach Bruce's first. But Coach, Breece Hall is your number 1 back heading into the draft. Why don't you go ahead and tell us some of your highlights, your lowlights, and I would assume there's probably not many lowlights about Mr. Breece Hall at Iowa State.
No, I think, being a film guy, I'm kind of coming around the analytics. I get why it's there. I understand how to use it, but I think just the coach in me, I think I gravitate to the film first and then use the analytics to see if it matches what I see on film. But Breece Hall, it's like, to me, that there's what is the weakness in his game? And I think when you look at, so I'm looking at his metrics. I start there, right? So if you say, if I'm looking at his metrics, he's 5'11", 217. So he's got the size. He's less than 21 years old. He's a 4.39 40 guy in the 97th percentile. He's got a 40-inch vertical. He's got a 10.5 broad jump. I mean, everything jumps out. His speed score, his burst score, his dominator, whatever metrics you want to use that the analytic people love to see, it's all there. And I think if you look at, I think the interesting stat that I found the other day, I got a couple fun facts here. So he was a 6th running back since 2003 to earn a 99 athleticism score. I know you're big on that, Christian. From next gen stats, the other 5 guys were Reggie Bush, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Najee Harris, and Travis Etienne. Pretty good company, right? From that perspective, and who those guys are as prospects coming into their respective drafts. So when you put Breece Hall and you kind of compare that with those guys, it's pretty impressive. I could go through each year, but to keep it short and sweet, I think from a running perspective, I look at highlights. I love his size and durability. He's a 3-down back at the next level, in my opinion. He's a dual threat guy, and he's never had less than 20 receptions in a season at Iowa State. I'm an Iowa State fan. I've had some family friends that had a son that played there. And of course, I was a Brock Purdy guy, having played out here in Arizona. So I watched a lot of their games. He scores from anywhere on the field. He's got, I think, 5 runs of 75 yards or more. He's got great vision in field. I think he's got an ability to set up and manipulate defenders at the second level. And I think that's something when you're watching film, that it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to understand how he is setting up his footwork at the first level and already looking to the second level. Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, guys just had unbelievable vision to see past that first line of defense in the second level. I think it's something Breece Hall does extremely well. He can run by you. He can run through you. He can run around you. He's physical at the point of contact. He can shed tackles. So he's got everything as far as that goes. Do I put him in the Saquon Barkley category? No, I don't. Not as a prospect. I don't think he's at that level. But I think he is very, very close to that. As far as his lowlights go, high volume guy, all 4 years in college. I know some concerns about that as you get into that 27, 28 age pegs for the ages out there, which I'm not necessarily a firm believer in 2022. I think guys can play a little bit longer than they used to. So I think it's kind of a funny thing that people put out. He does show a tendency to hesitate and lack burst at times when you watch him on film. And I think that's just, he can be so good at setting up blocks, it almost becomes a detriment to him on certain plays. And when he's looking to bounce outside, sometimes that decision isn't made as quickly as I would like. He's not real shifty in a phone booth. Prefers to use his size and strength to me in terms of running through tackles. So, but again, I think he's he's the RB1 and he's in a tier by himself, and then you get into tier 2.
Why don't you tell us your thoughts? I mean, one of the things that I heard there is you look at the numbers and they talk about generational, and I've seen a lot of people tweet the term generational when it comes with Breece Hall. But then you're talking about guys like Jonathan Taylor, and he just mentioned Saquon. How good is Breece Hall to you, Christian?
Well, now I'm also a little biased because I was low on Jonathan Taylor as a prospect, and I had concerns about his actual vision, and then he gets to the NFL, and those concerns were there, and then they weren't because he developed as a player, which is what you like to see, and you're excited about that. And that's kind of why I've kind of built in a little bit of a cushion with Breece's issues in that regard, because I don't necessarily think that he's not seeing the field. I think that he is just waiting because he, like you said, he likes to set up his blocks, and sometimes that makes him an indecisive runner. I saw that a little bit out of Jonathan Taylor. I didn't see a whole lot of patience from him though, so it kind of counteracted. But Breece Hall to me is I believe I have him in my top 10 overall big board this year. Definitely a tier of his own. I watched him play and I thought that he was athletic, but no part of me thought he was that athletic. And there are very few people that could have guessed that he would run 4.3s while also jumping that high and far. But fantastic player. When I first watched him last year, I said, I really kind of want to see him get better. He doesn't really run like a 220-pound back. So last year or 2 years ago now, he would go down on first contact quite a bit for someone that big. And I don't know if he was just overthinking things out there, but then you watch this 2021 film and that was gone. He has really good contact balance. He kind of bounces off tacklers pretty well. But I echo the sentiments too that I don't think that he's super shifty in a phone booth, and I think that that's some of what some of these other guys that I'm sure we'll get to kind of possess. And ultimately, if Reese is in a tier of his own, and I think he's kind of scheme diverse too. I think you get him in an outside zone scheme, and it's deadly though. So I'm interested to see where he goes. I know he's been mocked to the Bills quite a bit lately, so.
Well, I don't know if he's mocked to the Bills because so many people want him to go to the Bills because of their running back situation. But let's just get.
I'm one of those guys.
Well, I'm sure you are. We all are. I mean, we talk. I mean, any receiver that goes to Kansas City this year, we're all in on. But aside from that,
for sure.
Landing spots, real quick, because we're going to make this a 3-hour podcast if we don't pick it up a little bit. So landing spots, ideal situations, aside from Buffalo, because that's easy. Coach, where would you like to see him if he's not in Buffalo?
I love how you say besides Buffalo, because that's easy when I just said Buffalo. Way to set me up, man. So I did. I had him at Buffalo just because the thought of Josh Allen, having Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Jamison Crowder, I think is a good addition there. And, of course, Dawson Knox and what they can do offensively is obviously very exciting for a team that just missed out on getting the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. So, but if I took my second and third options, I had the Atlanta Falcons because I think there's a little bit of a scheme fit there. And I picked the Houston Texans because they need an RB1 guy. So I look at him as a bell cow back. You can categorize, is he complimentary? Is he change of pace guy? Or is he a bell cow guy? And I think we all agree Breece Hall is a bell cow guy. And those are three offenses that are looking for that, He's a good compliment, I think, to Cordell Patterson in Atlanta in terms of what they want to do with Cordell Patterson. And they had to use him more often than they wanted to because of need last year. If you bring in a Breece Hall, you eliminate some of that. I think that could be a good fit for him.
What about you, Christian? Where would you like to see him land?
Yeah, there are a few different fits. I mocked him to Buffalo in my final mock draft, so obviously I'm in on that as well. Even though that's not the scheme that I think that he's best fitting in. But I also think that they're going to adapt that scheme a little bit this year. But I like the Jets. I know Michael Carter truthers don't want to hear that, but I do think the Jets want a true lead back at this point. And I know they come from, a system where you can find backs on day 3 and they can be successful, but none of those backs are Breece Hall. And if Breece is sitting there at the top of the second, I think there's a real shot that the Jets just pull the trigger and go pair him with Michael Carter. Now, I think that would render Carter irrelevant here in a year.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate for that aspect, but I do like the scheme fit and what he could provide Zach Wilson as a 3-down workhorse back.
I think that's the hard part of doing this stuff, right? Is you have fantasy football versus NFL. And I think this is when it's fun for me because I feel like I'm looking at things from an NFL perspective, fantasy second.
Yep.
Right. So I think, from a fantasy perspective, you hate the landing spot for the Jets if you're a Michael Carter guy. But I think, man, that's a great fit. I'm actually upset I didn't put that one down. But I do think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, there's a reason why he's our boss. So let's move on.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's move on to number 2 for you, Coach. And it's a kid that came, he was a transfer kid, and he pretty much showed exactly what he was worth right off the bat, and that's Kenneth Walker with Michigan State. Why don't you tell us what you thought about him?
Well, and I think I'm with the consensus here. As you guys know, I track a lot of the consensus ranking and what sites are doing and where they're putting this year's class. But first people want to say, well, he was at Wake Forest, couldn't stick it out at Wake Forest, so he transfers out and goes to Michigan State. Look, I don't care about any of that. There's plenty of examples of guys that transferred out and did pretty well. There's a couple Heisman Trophy winners did the same thing. So I think when we talk about why guys transferred, I take that completely out of the conversation. The reality is the guy got 276 touches last year, turned that into 1,700 yards and 19 touchdowns at 6.3 yards per touch. And if you look at what now, and we know what the knocks are, but if you look at, again, another guy, I didn't expect him to run a 4.38. I was thinking 4.45, sub 4.5 for sure, but I was not expecting a sub 4.4. Another guy at 34-inch vertical. So again, the metrics also line up. The speed scores there. The only thing the 50.2% dominator rating, guys want to talk about dominator rating. I think that's all specific to where you play in the offense you're in too. But we know what the knocks are, right? We know that he doesn't have a lot of receiving upside from what he did at either Wake Forest or Michigan State. But I think people have to understand, it's worth noting, those are not teams that throw a lot to running backs. So I think you have to understand that too. I've heard people say, well, he caught 60. I was one of those guys joking around about, hey, he caught 64 balls in high school. And I think Jeff made a funny comment on it, if I remember correctly. But you look at what he does when he does get a chance to catch the ball. He doesn't look like he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't look like he's not fluid. He doesn't look like he doesn't understand, how to run a route. I don't get that, from him that he just can't do it. I think he just wasn't asked to do it. Now, does that mean I expect him to be Naheem Hines at the next level in terms of pass catching ability? No, I don't. But I do think it's something he can certainly work on. And by year 2 or 3, can he be more adequate? Like Derrick Henry learned to do? Yeah, I think there's a possibility there that he can do it. I think he has enough athleticism to do that. So I have him at number 2, partly because of what this draft class is, and secondly, because of what he showed on tape and then what he did at his pro day and the combine. I think the skill set's certainly there for him to be, the number 2 guy in this class.
Christian, is he your number 2?
He is. Yeah. So he was my 3, but that athleticism pushes him up a little bit. And I hate that that's kind of like the differentiator. But when you have guys that are kind of similarly tiered, which I had him considered in that tier 1 with the top 3, that's kind of what happens. And I kind of know that going in. But I echo a lot of that. I think Walker, to me, if he's just a catch a dump off and make something happen kind of guy at the NFL level, I'm cool with that. And that's where, you have to separate the NFL from the fantasy football when you're talking about Kenneth Walker, because some NFL team is going to be obsessed with the way he runs the football. He's got incredible burst. He's got the long speed. He's got so vision. And I think that stems from that really long mesh, disgusting stuff at Wake Forest, where he didn't really get an opportunity to read out the second level. It was just read out for him. So, but no, he's a fantastic back, and I am a fan. I think he's a really good value in rookie drafts right now too, for what it's worth. So,
no, I think it's funny because I put my notes for his lowlights outside of the pass catching ability and lack of receiving work was also he doesn't always trust the play design and can get off track. So you see him, whether it's I don't want to get into too much in the run scheme, but you see him not trust what he sees sometimes, or not want to necessarily go where the track is based on the run call and what the scheme is on that given play. And I think some of that's because he had some home run plays last season. He was finally the guy in a good program, and his stock was rising. I think as players, as athletes, especially when we're younger, we have a tendency to try to do too much sometimes because we've been so successful. And there were times on tape that you could see the lack of vision and him wanting to kind of either bounce it outside too quick or not trust the blocking scheme to take his time and be more patient. But I mean, it's so hard to find negatives on tape of this guy outside of receiving work.
Number 3, and I was a little surprised by your third pick, and then I remember where you live, and that's Arizona State's Rachaad White. Why don't you tell me why he's your number 3 back there, Bruce?
So I'll start with the negatives first for him. A lot of people want to talk about, he's 3.2 years old, right? The guy that, I say 0.2, like I put the months in there. He's a guy that signed out of high school at a Division II school in Nebraska-Kearney and then redshirted at a D2 school. So if you're looking at that stuff, you're saying, man, the guy wasn't even good enough to play at a D2 school. There's more to it. And then he goes to play in San Antonio College in California, Mount San Antonio College, who we scrimmaged against at Redlands. So I just want to throw that in there real quick, just because it's a pretty good program. But he becomes a first-team junior college All-American. Okay, he had 1,264 yards, 10 touchdowns, I think, his final season in 2019. Goes to ASU, and immediately, now unfortunately because of COVID, the Pac-12 was hit really hard in 2020. They only got 4 games in, but in those 4 games, he ran for 420 yards, averaged 10 yards a carry, 5 touchdowns, and then he had the 8 receptions for 151 yards and a touchdown there. So had he gotten a full season, I think we're talking about Rachaad White in a different light. After 2021, I think most people that didn't really follow ASU were like, oh, 2021 was a breakout year. Well, 2020 would have been his breakout year. Had that season not been cut as short as it was in the Pac-12. They weren't as fortunate as some of the conferences that got to play a few more games. So I just love what I see on tape. I mean, he's a guy that can catch 50, 60 balls at the next level. He shows good receiving skills. He's good. He can good in between the tackles. He's good outside the tackles. And he made an immediate impact at ASU. And also, I think he's got good size to be a 3-down back. I mean, I think there's other examples of guys in the NFL at his size that he can get it done as a 3-down back. Now, I do understand the NFL is moving away from a true 3-down back. There's a lot more running backs by committees. There's very few workhorses in the NFL now. But I think he has an above average toolbox of moves, both inside and outside the box. And, of course, we know what he gives you in the passing game. So I'm probably higher on Rachaad White than most. I mean, at some points, I was actually thinking about moving him into an RB2 category until you really start watching Kenneth Walker. You're like, man, I can't put him at RB2, but I'll certainly feel okay putting him at RB3.
What about you, Christian?
As a homer, I admit that.
Where do you have him, Christian? Is he that much of a homer?
No, I have him at RB5, so I'm a little lower, but I get it. I see all the flashes. There was one when I stumbled upon Rachaad. I think it was October, November, the first time I sat down to watch him. I had watched some Arizona State games and he popped, and so I tossed on some film a little early on that. And one of the first plays I saw was he lined up in the slot and he broke about 4 tackles and then outran the whole opponent, the whole team, the whole defense. So it was definitely an exciting start to what I think of Rachaad White. And I echo all of that. If I have a little bit of a gripe, it would be his contact balance. He tends to go down fairly quickly, but then you see the runs where he does bounce off 3 guys and makes them miss. And you feel pretty comfortable about it. And you're right. He has all that size. He's the same size as he's bigger than Kenneth Walker when you talk about 3-down backs. So I love Rachaad. He's been inside my top 6 now since my first grade I put on him. So
I've got him down that he struggles at time with contact balance and he struggles to make the first man miss. So you nailed it. I think that you see that on tape enough times, it becomes a concern.
All right, let's move on to number 4, which for number 4 for you is a guy that up until October was not my number 1 guy, and that's Isaiah Spiller. And first thing I think of Isaiah Spiller is CJ Spiller, and I get a little sick to my stomach because that's a guy who I invested a hell of a lot of draft capital back in the day for. Why don't you tell me what you like about Isaiah Spiller at your 4 spot there, Coach?
So I actually had, if you were go pre-NFL Combine Pro Days, I had him in between that 2-3 spot. Or I was just starting looking at Kenneth Walker more in the film a little bit. So I actually had him graded higher, but then because he's 6'2", 217. He got plenty of volume at Texas A&M, 540 carries over his 3 years, almost 3,000 yards rushing, 25 touchdowns. He showed the ability to be a 3-down back and to be a dual threat guy, but he's not 21 yet. Right? So I think that's a big plus. But a 4.64, and then you say, okay, there's other backs that ran 4.6 that have been successful in the NFL. Then you go only a 30-inch vertical, only a 9.5-foot broad jump. And there's other things from an athletic perspective that start to stand out. So that's when those concerns come in. So I just felt like from his athletic profile, I had some concerns. But when you watch the film, there are some things that certainly pop. I think his feet are always active. I think he's always looking for plus plays. I don't think he's a guy that shies away from contact. He's got above average hands as a receiver. He moves well laterally to make people miss in the open field, which I think is important at the NFL level. You just don't have enough of that home run hitter ability. So even though he's a 4.6 guy, he does have the ability to make people miss, to get you some extra yards, get you that first down. And he's a 3-year starter in the SEC. So I think that's got to mean something to come in as a true freshman and start and get 174 carries, almost run for 1,000 yards as a true freshman in the SEC. So there are a lot of things to like. But 74 catches, only 1 touchdown receiving, I think was a little bit. I think that's more scheme and where he was catching balls in that offense than it is more of a hindrance or a negative for him.
Yeah. So the reason I was looking down here is I thought of a player that I think kind of fits this exact mold, and it's Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs, not a crazy athlete, not super explosive. I think he's a really talented NFL back. I think he has shown that he can be a 3-down back. And so when I look at what Spiller's outlook could eventually be, it's something similar to that. I have Spiller as my RB3. I had wavered a little bit. I got a little nervous on the testing, but I mean, he's not a crazy athlete like these other guys, but I also don't think that it hinders him to that level where I'm really, really concerned that he's not going to be a good NFL running back. So his footwork is just incredible. I love watching him kind of weave between the tackles. I think he's a really good inside zone running back. So I actually think the Bills would be a nice fit for him. But yeah, which is kind of funny. But there are a lot of teams that run a lot of inside zone concepts. But I kind of hope Spiller lands with the Texans and kind of takes over that RB1 role for them.
Yeah, I think that's a good landing spot for him. I have him in this one going to Atlanta because I had Breece Hall going to Buffalo, but I was just picking one landing spot per running back. But I have him going to Atlanta, but not until pick 58. I think they take a wide receiver at 8. I think they could go best player available, but I feel like Atlanta needs something with Calvin really sitting out for another year to complement what they're trying to do with Kyle Pitts. So I can see this as a good landing spot for him in the second round at pick 58 to Atlanta. I don't think it's necessarily the best scheme fit, but I think there's enough there for him to carve out a role for sure.
Well, all I'll say about Isaiah Spiller, prior to all the numbers coming out for all these other people, he was the guy that I was hoping I can get. And when I was trading for 22 picks, it was for him. And if I can get him at the 108 to whatever, I'm freaking happy as shit to get him. So let's move on. And here's the weird thing is that Coach Bruce has been debating all day long on who his number 5 is. So I don't even know who his number 5 is. So here we go. Coach Bruce, if you would, please reveal the number 5 running back in the 2022 class for fantasy football.
I'm still struggling with it. So when I say where I'm going, I've got 4 guys in the same tier, right? Okay. So I've got Hall, and then I've got Walker, White, and Spiller in the same tier. And then I've got Zamir White, Damian Pierce, Brian Robinson, and Kyron Williams in that same tier, with Kyron kind of being towards the end of that tier. But so it's tough for me to go, who is your true number 5? I don't really have one. But if I'm going to talk about somebody that I think deserves an opportunity, because I know where Christian's going with this one, so I'm gonna go away from that. I would go between, I think, Zamir White. He's in a great situation at Georgia. They had James Cook. You didn't get to see as much in the passing game. But I think James Cook is a guy that can have a real receiving work, be a complementary back to a team that has a really good, first and second down back. But the only thing about Zamir White, so he's 20, he's going to be almost 23 or 23 by the time the season starts. But he's a 4.4 guy, almost a sub 4.4. 33.5-inch vertical, 10.7 broad jump. He's a 5-star recruit, actually a top 10 national recruit and the number 1 running back coming in. So, but if you look at the downside, only a 2.9% target share. Some of that's because of James Cook, but also he doesn't really show a lot on tape in terms of passing game. But if I had to choose one guy between him and Brian Robinson, although Brian Robinson's a guy that I really like as a Derrick Henry type in the right offense. He can be a high volume guy. He can get good first and second down work. But I'd go Zamir White here just because I got to pick somebody. So that's who I'm going to go with. There are concerns, with the ACL tear in 2017. I think he tore his right ACL. And then in the spring of 2018, he tore his right ACL. So he had to take a redshirt year. So I think that's something that's going to hold him back is age. If you're in the breakout age, again, especially for running backs, that could certainly hinder what a lot of people think in the fantasy community. But again, we're talking about NFL teams and where does he fit schematically. So that's my 5.
Zamir White. Zamir White, Mr. Christian Williams.
So I flipped. I got 2 more games of Zamir. So Zamir's my RB4. He's just ahead of Rashad. So I'm a big fan of his game. I know there's been a lot of talk about how he isn't creative in the open field, and he doesn't gain yards after contact. And I struggle to find that a reliable stat because I watch Zamir White truck people in the open field, and I would call that creating yards. If he's able to gain some yards after that, he might not be the most shifty, and maybe he still isn't fully trusting his knees because he has torn 2 ACLs. But
yeah,
I love Zamir's game. But I'll talk about my 6 because I think maybe this is where you thought I was going. But Damian Pierce.
Yes, that's where I thought you were going.
Yeah. So Damian Pierce, the only thing that bumped him down was actually his RAS, his athleticism, because these guys, to me, this 3 through 6, about 3 through 6 are in about the same tier. But Damian Pierce is a really, really fun running back. He's super bursty, but also elusive. He can run through you. He can run around you. He didn't get to play a lot in college because Dan Mullen doesn't really know what he's doing, and that's why he's not the coach of the Florida Gators anymore. But Damian Pierce was just super, super efficient with the ball in his hands. He's a really good pass blocking running back as well, which I know we don't talk about a whole lot in the fantasy space, but NFL teams are going to value that. He's a good pass catcher too, really good yak guy. And so I think that Damian Pierce is probably going to find himself selected on day 2. I actually think all of the backs that we just talked about will be selected on day 1 or day 2. So another guy that I'm super high on, and you can get Damian Pierce at the back of the second at this point in rookie drafts. So yeah, sign me up for all of that.
All right.
What's crazy about him is go ahead.
We're talking now my favorite part, and that's because as a fantasy manager, I don't pick very often because I don't pick very often early because I'm successful, or because I've traded all those early picks for people like a T. Higgins, like a deal I made today. So with saying that, I'm always interested in who's the next Elijah Mitchell, who's the next James Robinson. And so I'll go first because these are the type of guys I look at draft capital. You can talk about how great Breece Hall is, and I can tell you, awesome. I'm only going to be able to draft him one time because I only have one 101 pick. But a guy like Jerome Ford out of Cincinnati, if I'm in a draft and I'm on the 3rd round and I see him sitting there looking at me, I can't wait to draft him because I feel like anybody who had the ability just to step on the campus of Alabama and then go do what he did at Cincinnati, I feel like he may get a shot. And if you look at guys like Elijah Mitchell and Jane Robinson at the schools they were at, it's hard to argue with dart throws like a Jerome Ford.
Yeah.
So if you had guys to look for, who's your next Elijah Mitchell? If there's a guy late in the draft that you think that had got the great situation, like obviously Elijah Mitchell did, who would succeed in that opportunity? Let's start with you, Christian.
Yeah, so I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention it's got to be Kevin's pick. So I will say, so in the mold that I'm kind of thinking about this, Tai Chandler makes some sense. I think he's going to be a day 3 pick, but I think that he is a really, really talented back that really didn't see a whole lot of opportunity until he got to North Carolina. He's going to get drafted because
Williams had an effect on that, or
so actually, so Tai Chandler transferred in from Tennessee.
Yeah.
But Tai Chandler then went in and won the job outright against a ton of guys that people were pretty excited about. And all I saw on film was good burst, good vision, good pass catching, good contact balance, just all the things you kind of look for. He's got good speed too, and he's a fairly good athlete. I think he came in somewhere in the 8s in RAS, which is really, really good. But, and I hope I'm not taking someone's here, Kevin would kill me if I didn't talk about Pierre Strong from South Dakota State. Is that your guy?
That's my guy. Yeah.
All right. I'll let you talk about him, but he's a player that it was really hard to evaluate him to start because he was by far the best player on the field. It's kind of like that Trey Lance thing that we talked about last year where Trey Lance was running through guys, but he was running through guys that are going to be, attorneys and I don't know, accountants and stuff, where that was the same thing for Pierre Strong. So I couldn't really gauge what he was going to be. And then he went to the East West Shrine Bowl and tore it up against all these other guys that are about to get drafted. And then he went out and he posted a 9.3 relative athletic score. He's a raw runner. He's got some things to clean up for sure. But if I wanted to bet on a guy with just super athleticism that I think could figure it out and become a legitimate fantasy back, I think it's Pierre Strong.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say Kevin is a very smart guy, because that would be my call as well. And I think that is the knock, right? Like playing at South Dakota State in the Missouri Valley Conference, I think for people are looking at it and saying, yeah, well, he played it, in the Missouri Valley Conference. He played it, in an FCS program. It's like, hey, if you watch South Dakota State, North Dakota State, some of the teams that are in that division, there's some really good football players every year to get drafted in the NFL to get opportunities. So I think we're just not used to seeing as much at the running back position, but especially for a guy that, he redshirted his freshman year, but 7 yards a carry over the course of, 4 seasons there. 4,500 rushing yards, over 7 yards carry. I hit on that. 40 touchdowns. And on top of that, he had 63 receptions for another, 600 yards. So he shows he can do both. I think he's a 4.37 with a 36-inch vertical, 5'11", 207. So he's a guy that you heard a lot of hype about, especially after the combine, and it was really not fun to go back and look at, guys like you guys that I look at, looking at what you guys did with the Debbie stuff and what you guys are coming out with and following that and going back. And I've got a chat room. I think you guys are both in it, but it's a film chat room, but it's not just for fantasy purposes. That's kind of a separate chat room. This one's really guys that grind film and lay their hat on that part of what they do in the Twitter space at the end, and have a lot of, scouting NFL connections. And those guys were very, very big on Pierre Strong as well. So as you start to hear that noise, you start looking at it and analyzing your own breakdown. I just don't know what there is not to like other than just saying the guy played at a small school. But then you look at the athletic profile and you go, it all measures up. So I put down just real quick for a landing spot for him, because I want to touch on this one, is after I could see a guy like him going to Kansas City. I think he brings an element that CEH and Jerick McKinnon don't bring, which is that real, true, raw, breakaway speed. He's an excellent pass catching back, I think, in this offense that brings home run ability. You can do some things with him that you saw them do with Tyreek Hill, just when they line him up at running back, or some of that screen game stuff that they use. So it'd be a fun spot for him. So there's my 2 cents on Pierre.
There you go. So if you're out watching this and you're sitting there in the 4th round rookie drafts or 3rd round rookie drafts, Pierre Strong, Tyson Chandler, Jerome Ford, take the dart throw shot. I think you'll be happy with any one of those 3. Now we're going to move on. And the last thing we're going to talk about, draft day traditions. For me, man, I can remember sitting there on a Friday night or a Saturday morning and watching first round all the way through round 5, getting up Sunday morning. The draft day has always been my favorite part of NFL football, and that'll never change. And so now we get prime time on a Thursday. Before we talk about what we're going to do this week, what are kind of things that you like to do, Coach Bruce, on the draft? I mean, I got to think the draft is as big as anything else.
Well, I remember growing up, it was a huge day. I mean, my dad was a huge Cowboys fan, and I lived with my mom. Mom and dad were divorced, but I would go over to dad's house to watch the NFL draft. And it was you grilled, and you barbecued everything you could, and you just, whatever. And you had, I'm not going to tell you how many beers my dad could probably throw down, but that's just what I remember as a child was growing up. And it was all about the NFL draft. You got home from school, and if you didn't ditch school that day with parents' permission, and you watched the draft. And as you get older, it changes a little bit, right? Now you're the guy that's doing that. Well, my family's not necessarily totally into the whole football thing, so I'm kind of on an island by myself there. But I still do the same thing. I still will sit in front of the TV for hours. It's been nice meeting people in the Twitter space because now I get invited to a couple podcasts every year, the last year and then again this year to share some insight on the draft. So that's kind of something I truly look forward to.
Christian, how are you going to spend this draft? You sit there and go, God, please get me 9 picks that are right. Because I believe your tweet today said you were 8 out of 32, and that's your best. So how are you going to spend this week's draft?
Yeah, too quickly to touch on that. 8 out of 32. Randy kind of hopped in and had to brag about it. Randy got 14 of his picks right on last year's mock. Just it would have ranked 3rd in on the Huddle report, which is kind of where like the experts are graded. Just an absurd mock last year. So I'm hoping to just beat him this year. That's kind of the goal. But every year for the NFL draft, for the last 3, I believe, we do a live stream, which that has become the new tradition, which is really fun. We do it right here on this network. You can find it on YouTube and Twitter. And so we will be doing that again this year. It's not going to be as crazy, I don't think. I think we're just going to do round 1, so Thursday night. Last year we did day 1 and day 2, and then StreamYard actually said, you've been on here too long, so sorry, you're booted. But yeah, that's the new tradition. The old tradition was drinking my pain away, watching the Browns make stupid picks, like Justin Gilbert and Johnny Manziel and things like that. So
I like how you threw that in though.
Yeah.
Well,
as a Cowboys fan, we've certainly had our share of bad picks, so I can relate.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Christian, I'm so thankful that you came on. Thank you for the opportunity that you've given Coach Bruce and I. Coach Bruce, we kind of next week's real busy for me. I got a whole bunch of stuff going on next week with golf and my daughter being recruited for softball. So we're going to go catch a UCLA softball game next Wednesday night on a recruiting trip. And we're pretty excited about that. But we were
UCLA softball is big time.
Just a little bit. We were kind of hoping to go live Thursday night, but it sounds like you'll be using this account. But we'll jump in, we'll talk, and we can't wait for the draft.
Yeah. Well, and you guys are more than welcome to come on. We're going to have people hopping in and out. I think Kevin and Jeff are both going to stop by. So it'll be
awesome.
We'll call it the Cut Royale on Thursday night. But and Adam from the College Football Cut Show, I think he's going to hop in. So anytime you guys want, the broadcast will be there. You guys can hop in. We'll get a lot of good info going because it's going to be a wild one on Thursday.
Oh, I can't wait, man. It's going to
this year's draft for sure. Is the uncertainty. It seems much. I mean, I know you guys are talking about getting 8 out of 32 picks right or 14 out of 32 picks right. But the deal with this year is we don't know anything. And I'm looking forward to it. I'll tell you what a great podcast. Thank you so much, Christian. Coach Bruce,
Thank you.
you're the man as always. Christian, thank you so much. And we're finally here at draft next week.
All right, man. We'll see you guys.
Appreciate you both.